Happy holidays, everyone. And Jamie is back for another 12 Days of Giving. And last year's was really, really fun. Also, one of actually the most downloaded episodes we had within the 12 days last year. He didn't know that, but I'm going to lay it on him now with that. So without further ado,
Wow.
Jamie, welcome back to 12 Days of Giving. Cannot wait for this year.
I appreciate it, man. I can't. It went by in a blink of an eye. I feel like we just recorded last year's session, and now here we are.
Yep, here we are. So what do you got for us this year?
Well, this year's is a little bit different. I think it's really an opportunity to share a pretty impactful story on a case that we had recently. This I say young gal. She may not feel like she's that young these days, but it was one of our younger clients. But she had a pretty unique situation where she had a lot at stake in her divorce, and we spent a little bit of time with her, peeled back the onion, so to speak, and did a deep dive in some of the financial documents that she had, and really just tried to spend some time with her going through her case. And we were able to save her lots and lots of money, which was, I think, is going to really, in many ways, change her life, man. So happy to share the details about it as much as we possibly can to give your listeners something to think about as if they're unfortunately going through the divorce themselves.
Which we know statistically happens a lot, right? So it's not like something that is, cat out of the bag situation. Divorce happens a lot in America, and it's something that we have to deal with. So walk us through as much as you can, kind of the background of getting into the divorce and reaching out to you. I know we bring that up on every episode, but we know it's very important to have a team specifically when you're going through a divorce. Walk us through that a little bit and walk us through what you found out, and then we'll get through like not how much you saved per se, but like what you did in order to save her so much in the divorce.
And you're right, man. I mean, 50% of the people that we know and love that are in a marriage situation are likely, unfortunately, going to get divorced. And if they're in a same-sex marriage, or if they're in a second marriage, the statistics are a lot worse. So a lot of people out there are going through this. But this lady, her name is Mary. I'm not making that one up. Her name is Mary, and she came to us. I forget how she found us. I think she came through one of our podcast episodes. Is how she found out about us. But the story goes, she was on the tail end of her divorce, had hired an attorney to get her through this process, and wanted somebody to come in and really just be a second set of eyes on this potential settlement that she was, planning on agreeing to before we got involved. And in her particular case, there's another challenge that she faced is she has a special needs daughter who she is full-time caregiving for. So that adds in a whole other layer of complexity, especially around things like taxes and child support and ongoing support. So we sat with her and basically just try to get an understanding of where is she at right now and what is the framework for the agreement. And in this particular case, there's a pension involved, there's a 401k plan involved, and there's some other assets. One being the house. And she really wanted to keep the house, but because of the amount of money in this particular case, she's the breadwinner. And in this particular case, she was going to have to give up basically half of the assets to the husband. And he wasn't really playing along as far as caregiving for the daughter. And so there was that dynamic involved, but there was also the complexity of, I might have to sell my home but I really want to stay in it, but I think I'm going to have to sell my house simply because I don't know if I can afford to pay him, care for my daughter, and then also give myself the future life that I'm aiming for. So, we hear this a lot, right? We deal with these cases all the time, and every situation is different, but you know how it is. Even in the traditional financial planning roles that we play, you see the same movie over and over again. It might be different actors, maybe, some different aspects that are different, but, it tends to be the same movie. And we've seen this one before. Well, she came to us and we have what's called a divorce clarity package. And in the divorce clarity package, people come to us and for a reduced rate, they work with us on a 30-day window. So we basically say, okay, like send us all your stuff. We're going to review what you have, and we'll help you for the next 30 days. And these are great engagements because not everybody needs us to work with them for a year or two while they're going through their divorce. Sometimes they just need your help in like point in time, which is what Mary needed help with. So we looked at the pension, which was the pension. People think that pensions are simply a calculation of how much money is coming in every month and how long do I think I'm going to live, and multiplying those numbers together to come up with a value. Well, there's a lot more that's involved. There's things like the interest rate environment, the discount rate, the actuarial tables, length of employment, length of the marriage. There's the whole calculation we run to be able to put an actual value on that pension. So we did that. Then we looked at the 401k plan, and we said, okay, well, like how is this allocated? That was pretty straightforward. And then we looked at her options with the house. And when you looked at the agreement that she gave us, ultimately what it came down to was she was going to give up half of all the assets, and she was going to sell the house. That was what the agreement was, because based on her situation, that the attorney figured, hey, this is probably the easiest way to cut this thing in half and just move on. And the other wrinkle in this was the way that the attorney was explaining how to do the QDRO, which is dividing up the retirement accounts, was also inaccurate. So okay. we go through this whole thing, and we're looking at it. We're like, something doesn't add up on the pension. So we're looking. We dove into it and ran the calculations, and sure enough, the numbers that they were putting behind the value of that pension were completely inaccurate. So not only is this lady putting all of her faith into this attorney to get her through the divorce, but she's also putting her faith in the mathematics behind the pension. She's putting her faith in the following the recommendations relative to the QDRO and what to do with the house. And when we actually spent some time with it and really dug into it, the difference between what we had as far as the value of the pension and what the attorney was giving was somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 or $400,000.
Oh,
changes things, because now she doesn't have to give up $400,000 over 401k. It's now down to like $140,000. Now she has more money in her back pocket where she can support her daughter and keep the house. So, this $2,000 investment she made with us came out to be like a $400,000 win, and she gets to keep the home that she wants to keep. So, I felt good about this one, man. I felt good about this one. And I felt bad for the attorney because she had to go back to the attorney, and I'm not really sure how those conversations went because I wasn't privy to them, but I can imagine they didn't go too well. But sometimes it's just about understanding, like how all this stuff works. And the other, with the QDRO, I forget exactly what the attorney was basically telling her, just take a distribution out of the 401k plan. And it was, instead of doing the QDRO and dividing things up and not paying the taxes on those distributions, I forget exactly because it's been a little while what the details are of the QDRO, but I do remember that there was bad advice and it was related to taxes. So we saved her on the tax front too.
That's massive. That
is massive. It's a big one. Yeah.
How did she feel at the end of it, right? I mean, there's a lot of emotions there. One, she gets to keep the house, daughter in the house, take care of her daughter. That is a high. But you have the opposite of that emotion too, of, well, maybe she feels wronged and not getting the right stuff from the attorney. How do her emotions go through this?
I remember when I first met her, how nervous she was, and it's okay for people that are working with financial planners, especially if you're going through a divorce, to have some of that anxiety, because you don't really know what kind of feedback you're going to get. You don't know if you have, if you have a good argument or what your settlement's going to look like. There's all these questions that you have that creates that anxiety. And I could tell she had a lot of it. when I was able to deliver that news to her, and we draft a whole recommendation and we'll put it all in documented form for her, and I was able to actually deliver that to her. You could see the weight was lifted for sure, for sure. This was a huge win for us, and now it's, she's able to do a lot of the things she didn't think she was going to be able to do, and for the next chapter of her life.
Oh, that's an amazing story. And I think there's a few parts that I brought out, like what I figured out from it is one, just when you're going through the situation, no matter where you are in the process, unless you've already signed, obviously, is just a 30-day review, just a little snippet of having someone else come in. One could save you, but also it might just give you that other opinion to stick to your case or to let you know what's real, what's not. The other is, and we've talked about this on I think every episode we've been together, is attorneys are great at what they do in their lane. When it becomes to the money, that's not their lane, and it really should never be their lane, right? That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. And I thought you catching the QDRO, that's massive, and that one probably is one of the bigger ones in almost every divorce is some type of QDRO situation. And for people to understand that, like, yeah, you taking a withdrawal and then splitting it, massive taxes. The QDRO is there for his exact reason of being able to divide your assets without the taxable event. So those were the points that I really felt from this story that are one, massive in what they do in terms of return of working with someone like you, or the fact of like you just kind of need to know these things so you don't feel like you get, cheapskated or any of those things.
Yeah, in like you said, the attorneys just don't understand this stuff, the financial aspects of things, and how it all works. And to give bad advice on taking distributions out of a retirement account, but instead of foregoing the QDRO, or I forget exactly what the details were, but I remember whenever she told me that, I was like, I don't think that's how this works. And this, it wasn't too hard to uncover that mistake, but yeah, man, this was life changing for her, and I'm glad to have been a part of it.
Absolutely. So, everyone listening, while you're sitting around, I'm sure you know someone who's going through a divorce, maybe going through a divorce, you're going through a divorce. Simplest thing is reach out, whether it's to Jamie, myself, someone. Obviously, we want it inside of our own collective, selfishly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
of
hey,
course.
you're here as a resource because it is so important to get that set of eyes to see things that you don't know, especially if you're only working with an attorney. They don't see things either. And the experience that Jamie and his team have is bar none. So while you're sitting around, maybe listening to this or even getting a glimpse of this, make sure to reach out so we can help. And I know there's a lot of people going through this, and just to have someone in your corner a little bit through this emotional time period will pay dividends, regardless if we catch an issue like you just heard on this story today.
Yeah, and think about it if you look at it from a medical perspective, right? If you had something major that you were dealing with from a medical perspective, you would get a second opinion and probably even a third opinion. When you're making decisions in divorce, these decisions are going to impact you for the next 20 or 30 years of your life. These are incredibly impactful decisions that you're making, and sometimes you're making under what you feel like is a little bit of emotional duress. Why wouldn't you just take a beat and get a second set of eyes on things? It just makes sense.
It does. It truly does. Jamie, appreciate you. Have a happy holidays. Everyone listening, also happy holidays.
Appreciate you.